Welcome, and thank you for joining me today to learn more about how your Ohio business can expand sales opportunities into foreign markets. My name is Roberta Winch. I am the Export Assistance Network Director located at the Ohio SBDC Columbus State Community College. Before we get started, please note that we have decided to record this presentation, thus please hold your questions until the end. I am happy to engage in a lively conversation with you at that time. My role as Export Director is to find and encourage small and medium-sized businesses to consider and engage in exporting. I market the export service programs listed here, which are managed by Ohio's Department of Development. I will provide more details on these programs towards the end of the presentation. Today, we will take a look at export readiness considerations and planning, the Ohio resources available, inclusive of grant programs for both the export experienced and inexperienced companies, and additional student resources from Ohio undergraduate business programs. So let's begin by taking a quick look at Ohio's exports. Ohio is the 7th largest exporting state in the US. We sell into numerous and diverse markets, and it is worth a lot of money to our economy. Leading destinations, Canada and Mexico, thanks in great part to our free trade agreement with these North American neighbors. Top export categories include machinery, vehicles, and aircraft. Given these statistics, you may ask yourselves whether SME, small and medium-sized enterprise exports matter, and they do. Why export? Because 95% of the world's population resides outside of the United States, and because our small and medium-sized businesses have the greatest potential to make an impact. How? Ease of access via global internet and e-commerce, increased profitability due to increased and diversified sales, and our US-centric competitive advantage. We are globally recognized for producing quality products, our innovativeness and nimbleness, our customer service, and ethical business practices. Perhaps most importantly, engaging in international market activity provides you critical feedback on your product or service offering. We are living in a globally connected economy. Walking a foreign trade show, an example, can provide confirmation of your product, value proposition, and competitive placement. You may also gain ideas to further innovate your product or better understand how to customize your product or service for a foreign market. Addressing any misconceptions that SME exports are negligible, they in fact currently account for $541 billion and nearly 6 million jobs in the United States. Hence why the state of Ohio offers export services and programs to encourage our companies to engage internationally. It is a critical economic driver. Our typical clients look just like you. They are companies who understand and have experience with their products and services in the domestic marketplace. Exporting is a long-term consideration, and due to ever-changing political and regulatory environments, it is never a stagnant proposition. Thus, I work closely with my clients over a period of years. As part of export readiness, these are a few of the questions to consider. This is slide 10. Per the last question listed, Bruce, if you want to go ahead and pull this down. Per the last question listed, US companies are typically very comfortable selling into Canada due to our geographic proximity, shared language, similar customs, and consumption trends. However, it is a foreign country with a specific import regulatory environment that can be inclusive of French language labeling requirements. As well, Canada has other taxation policies unique to each province and temporary visa requirements for US workers entering Canada. These are just a few of the considerations that can easily trip up an unaware US exporter. Before discussing more tactical strategies, I do want to give a shout out to service exports. In 2018, the US exported $746 billion worth of services. Service exports account for about 35% of total US exports. What has changed? For one, traditionally manufactured products are now embedded with electronics that need diagnosed and repaired. Service technicians are often obliged to travel cross-border to provide these technical services or to train foreign distributors. This list highlights high-growth export service categories. I have clients in the Columbus region representing 8 of these 10 categories listed. Onto the tactics. This DART method in the next slide is definitely not advisable when it comes to market selection. Next. Ideally, our export initiative should start with a plan. Even if you have interest from a specific market, here I have listed key components that should be evaluated, some of which are applicable to both product and service exports. When trade data is available, it is very valuable. Tracking the flow of products like yours on a global scale is very helpful to understand markets of potential interest. Developing an export plan does take time, and some of the trade databases come with a hefty cost, which leads me to my next slide. I believe there are more on that. Bruce, thank you, sorry. Where do you begin? Ohio provides its SMEs with export support services to hold your hand through the entire process. This just highlights a few of our services. When you have any questions about starting or expanding your international initiatives or network of export directors or initiatives, our network of export directors positioned in 8 locations in Ohio are ready to assist. And it should be noted that we do not charge for these services. Beyond export advising, the state of Ohio offers 3 additional export-focused grant programs that your EAN director will help you navigate. The International Market Support Program provides our companies access to free in-market consulting services. These services can range from a high-level evaluation of market conditions to identifying a distribution partner. If our companies need that on-the-ground support, IMS will try to assist. Image is a grant program funded by Ohio's Department of Development and the U.S. Small Business Administration. Its purpose is to encourage U.S. SMEs to market internationally. The next grant year period begins October 1. Each year, there are unique eligible activities available. A company applies and once approved can execute on their chosen activities. And upon completion, they will be reimbursed up to 50% of up to a max spend of $20,000. I recommend placing a recurring reminder on your calendars to reach out to your local EAN director, like myself, on September 25th to explore upcoming eligible image activities. And finally, our Ohio Export Internship Program. This is a work development grant program. Ohio undergraduate university students are trained in exporting over the course of each spring semester. They are then placed in Ohio SMEs across Ohio to work on export-focused projects. In this manner, companies profit from having a student who can focus on furthering their export initiatives. The students benefit as they are paid $17 an hour by the companies. The companies are then reimbursed for 50% of those wages at the end of the summer. Does your company have potential interest in exporting but needs some additional support to explore that interest? Well, you are in luck. I am able to support companies in several ways beyond traditional export advising, utilizing student resources. First, I support the OEIP classroom as co-instructor and project lead at the OSU Fisher College of Business. As part of the OEIP education, I invite new to export companies to serve as project hosts. The student teams develop export strategic plans for those companies. Second, I am the advisor for the OSU Fisher College of Business Global Trade Consulting Group. Every fall, I seek out new to export companies and have former OEIP student volunteers to create top 3 export market or full export strategic plans for those companies. This gives the students another opportunity to engage in export work and helps them build their resumes. Third, we have the OEIP, Ohio Export Internship Program, as I mentioned before. If you were to hire an intern, they could use the summer to focus on export-focused projects. Finally, thank you for joining me today, and I am welcome any questions and any discussion that you have.
No questions in chat. Anyone have questions they would like to pose to Ms. Roberta?
Or just,
Mike, Teresa, Jackie, anybody?
or a shout out, or a question about something pertaining to your company is fine.
I have a question. So if I'm a business owner, how do I know I'm ready to start exporting or to explore that as an option? What key indicators should I look for?
Really, it's being successful with your domestic business. So, you know, this delving into exporting from a place of a startup is typically not advisable. Sometimes I will engage and work with, you know, a startup incubator like Rev1 downtown. The only reason I'll consider that is sometimes we have products or technology that it can be more readily launched internationally rather than domestically. So I had a product that was a teeth whitening product, and it actually would be easier to get through the counterpart of our FDA in Japan. It would be easier to launch in Asia than it would to get to launch it here. So there are some exceptions to that, but generally what we're looking for is a company who really has an understanding of their product or service, has some really good experience with it. And it's not really a matter of years of experience. It's a matter of, you know, it could be 1 year, but that you have a real understanding and sort of have worked through any of the challenges with that product or service here first before we start looking at foreign markets. It does take your attention. So if you have your hands super full, just trying to navigate your domestic market, and launching an export initiative at that same time might be taxing.
Okay, so in your experience, what are the biggest challenges for businesses that want to get into exporting?
Knowledge, lack of knowledge, honestly, and that's why we're here. And that's why this Ohio Export Internship Program actually has been so successful. It was launched in 2012, and the real reason it came about was there was actually, it was one of my colleagues over in the Ag Department of Development who realized that there were a lot of agricultural companies, based companies, so, you know, food companies and so forth, that had potential to export, but they didn't have the knowledge, they didn't have the time, they didn't have the manpower. And so he approached OSU to identify if there was an opportunity to bring students into this. And so it was a mutual agreement that and turned into a grant program that OSU, and it was the initial classroom, would start. We started with 10 students, I think, maybe 9 students back in 2012. And we train them and everything about exporting in the spring, and then place them right into the companies in the summer. And those students are not out in those companies, I mean, by themselves. Frankly, if they're in newer to export companies, those students will know more than the companies do about exporting. They'll have kind of a nice kind of overview of everything about exporting, you know, how to pick a market, and what are the logistics involved, and you know, what are what's the regulatory environment in this particular country. I mean, and then the beauty of it is that myself and my other EAN directors across Ohio, we're supporting those students all summer long. And so I would say lack of knowledge and education and trade, which is normal, you know, most companies are not going to have that, but that's where we have the EAN directors. We're here to help you. And again, our services are complementary. So we really encourage folks to reach out to us, and we can discuss your company and walk through and determine if you're export ready. And if you're not, we'll help you develop a plan to become export ready.
Thank you. Jackie asked, how do we find students who may be interested in interning for export work?
That program is through me. I can help you depending on where Jackie is located. Also, my EAN colleagues are throughout Ohio. So there's eight offices, and we have multiple people in some of those offices, but it really all starts with locating and finding your EAN SBDC director, and they will help you navigate to students, not only students who might potentially be an intern for you in the summer, but also if you're looking for interns with export experience and knowledge, we can, I think it's through our LinkedIn or Facebook page, through Ohio Department of Development, we can, and OSU, we can go back out to students who've come through the program and advertise that company that is looking for someone. So we have kind of a network. And I mean, I have access to know so many students at this point that when I have a company ask me about some, you know, an opportunity, once I understand the company, I can almost come up with the fit for a student and see if they're available. So
Excellent. Thank you. So Mike asks, what are some of the best ways to research what countries might be the best for my business to consider exporting to?
okay, if you have a product and you research the Schedule B number, and if you're lucky enough that your product is super specific, that is an excellent way, first step in identifying the flow of goods globally of that particular product. So you can see where that product is, you know, being exported from and where it's being imported to. So for instance, peanut butter, it's very straightforward, you know, it's very easy to take that Schedule B, which is an export classification number, and track the flow of that type of goods. Now, if you're talking about a ball bearing, for instance, that's one of actually the trickiest classifications to identify, and there's many versions, and so it becomes more of a commodity unless you can. So another way is, you know, I had a bat company once, right? And so maybe it was hard to find the flow of baseball bats, but I could find the flow of balls. Okay, and so, you know, where baseball bats are flowing, probably baseballs are flowing too. So sometimes you look at dual things that might travel along with your product, like things. But Mike, please call me, or I can connect you to, if you're not located in Columbus region, I can connect you to someone else, and we help you do that. We will help you navigate that. We are kind of teachers. We don't always go out and actually do the work, but we show you and work with you and educate you on how you can find this information.
Great, thank you. What are some of the common mistakes a company makes when entering into exporting?
One of them is, and these are all really good questions too. One of them is my cousin said that, you know, exporting to, you know, the Dominican Republic for my product would be really a real win. It's not that we wouldn't take that into consideration. I think, you know, that's an interesting place to start. But what I really like to do research and really use data to determine where we're going. Because it's an investment. So what I try to do, I consider it a win if, number one, I get a hold of a company and I can see they're not ready to export. I'd rather, you know, give them that export education to get them ready. Number two, make sure that they don't spend money that they don't have to spend. It is very easy to find service providers out there who will promise you lots of things, but you don't have to pay for those services in Ohio. These services are provided by your Ohio tax dollars, so you've already paid for them in essence. My role is to get out there and make sure you know about us. So we are at your service to help you through this. And then the third thing is a mistake is compliance. So you as an exporter hold the responsibility for that. You know, if you're the exporter of record, you are responsible for that transaction. So you have to, as part of that, you have to know who you're shipping to. If you're shipping to somebody who ends up being on a denied parties list under the federal government, that's a problem. And mistakes can happen, you know, that are very costly and can actually end up in jail time. Now, I've seen costly mistakes for sure, but I haven't, fortunately, experienced the jail time part of it. So far so good, but I hate costly mistakes too. I had one where somebody shipped something and they ended up paying the import duties, which they should not have paid. And then they were trying to get that money back, and it was a lot. And they really, it was a first time shipment to someone, like they just didn't really understand the process. And, you know, at that point, it's really hard to get money back. So really try to avoid spending money you don't have to.
Thank you. And Jackie asked, is this or a similar program available outside of Ohio? Is it available in Maryland, for example?
Yes, actually, I happen to know that. There's actually a great group of folks in Maryland. And the reason I know that is that my students at OSU participated in a national or maybe international competition last year. And that company was based in Maryland. And so if Jackie wants to email me, it's up on the screen. I will connect you to that group. I mentioned, and you may have all caught this, that image grant. So that's called, the formal sort of name for it is step image funding or step funding. A lot of, not every state, but a lot of states have that funding. They all call it a different name. We call it International Market Grant for Exporters. Maryland has a different name for it. If you Google also Maryland Export Services, it's going to be housed under potentially their Small Business Development Center, potentially a chamber, potentially their development. But I'm happy to share that with you. And they have a strong one, so you'll be in good hands.
Thank you. How would you say that the pandemic and the shifting economy is affecting the export market?
Well, our logistics are kind of a mess right now. So, you know, we're still struggling with the shipping, and my understanding is that's not going to be resolved anytime soon. I think, you know, the pandemic actually brought, and it drove a lot more people to exporting and an interest in exporting. I think maybe they had the time, they weren't traveling, they were at their computers, and we had a really strong response to our webinars and to our grant programs too. I think folks realized, wow, you know, even though it was a pandemic, my companies who were exporting internationally fared better. Because typically, you know, when things weren't going well here initially, they were still going well, you know, in some of the other countries. And, you know, even in Germany in itself wasn't down the entire time. Different segments of Germany were down, but the whole country wasn't down at once. And so it was kind of an interesting phenomenon. So I would say logistics is still a big issue. I think that, you know, we definitely had more folks looking at online opportunities and e-commerce, but there's no reason to not explore, you know, exporting today, right now, and start talking about it and planning for it.
Thank you. Where would you say you are recognizing the greatest growth potential for exports? Is that commodities, durable goods, raw materials, or services?
Gosh. That's a little bit tough. I mean, you know, when I think about the state of Ohio and I think about, you know, maybe looking at where our companies are utilizing that international market support, we always do a lot in Europe. You know, China, we're not doing much with, obviously. And, you know, I wasn't doing much with Eastern Europe to begin with. But Western Europe is always, we have a lot of projects. We have a lot of projects in Mexico. We're getting more in South America. Africa is really bubbling up, and we have opportunity. We have folks on the ground in Africa. So that's bubbling up. I'm seeing more coming along with like healthcare, medical device technology. That's in my Columbus region. I'm seeing that pop up a little bit more. I haven't done a lot with Japan. For a couple of years. Japan's tough. It's not impossible, but it is tough. It's tough from a regulatory perspective, I would say. It's tricky. And of course, Canada. We do Canada, Mexico, Western Europe, and Latin America. I would say we do a lot, but we have representation all over.
Okay. that last group of countries, they're the easiest to work with for an exporter?
I think we just do a lot with them. Yeah, I think we do a lot more.
Okay.
I'm seeing Latin America bubble up more, Colombia, doing, just seeing from my territory, seeing some interest in Belize, Peru, so it's interesting.
Okay, thank you. Mike asked, does the state of Ohio pull together companies and take them to foreign countries to explore export opportunities?
We do. Yes, we do. We do pull together trade missions, and we also pull together groups to go to trade shows, especially if it's around sort of a larger category like medical device equipment. Some of those are organized by my group. I've taken trade missions to Mexico for several, probably 3 different years. And of course, that's been on hold with the pandemic. But my colleague just took a group over to Dubai for Arab Health earlier in the year. And we also are aligned and work with Zoe Monroe. She her full-time job, and she represents the Council of Great Lakes Governors and Premiers. She is constantly organizing trade missions and trade shows, or trade missions, all around the globe. And we support our companies if they want to participate in one of those. More details on that, just reach out to me, Mike. It sounds like we should definitely get connected, or I can connect you to the right folks. Happy to do that.
Thank you. What does it cost to export? Are there hidden costs, things people need to be aware of, and how does that impact the business's bottom line?
Yeah, well, I don't like surprises. I mean, I'm okay with like small, there's some unknowns. I was just visiting with a company yesterday, and I'm okay with like, oh, this was $500 more than I anticipated, but I'm not okay with $5,000 or $50,000 necessarily. $50,000 for sure not, So it's all about the plan, and it's like anything, and it's like writing a business plan. It does take time. Most people wouldn't really know where to begin on that. And that's where, I can assist, my colleagues can assist. And I think by utilizing our grant programs, that is going to help minimize costs. Because let's give you an example. Let's say we do a plan, we determine that we want to export to the UK. Okay, so you're working with us, and we get involved with the International Market Support Program, and we connect you to our consultants in the UK. Well, then they're going to do a project for you. Maybe you want to find some distributors in the UK. Okay, so they're going to go off and they're going to do this project and come back and suggest some distributors, and you're going to decide if, they look right for you, and then you can have an opportunity to, a lot of this is done virtually. And then we're going to look at your industry and your product and say, hey, there's a trade show in maybe the UK or maybe just in Europe somewhere. And the timing is May. Okay, so now we're going to either have you walk that trade show, which is a great way to get introduced to see if it's the right trade show for you, or you're going to present, you're going to have a booth. Okay, so now we're going to have you going, let's say in a May timeframe. We're going to have the office schedule you appointments with those potential distributors, so you get to meet them. They most likely would be attending such a trade show, or if not, you can see them before or after. But our office on the ground will help you schedule those. So then we can wrap around and use that image grant to wrap around and offset the cost of these things. It could offset the cost of your trade show booth up to 50% of the cost. It could offset, it could cover it 100%, but you could have expenses like the hotels and the airfare and the trade booth, etc. Maybe you had to translate some marketing materials. These are things that might be eligible under the image grant, and then you would execute on all of that and pay for that. But at the end, you would get reimbursed 50% of those charges. That's the smart way to engage in executing your international plan. You want to really utilize these resources. It's money. So And logistics, and when I just think about a place where it can be costly, logistics right now is very costly. So just understanding and thinking through as part of the plan, your product, is it a super heavy product? Are we going to send this by boat? Are we sending it by air? What are the import tariffs? Are there taxes on top of that? Not that you pay that, but your importer, your distributor, or your customer, somebody's paying that. That's going to impact your landed cost, which is going to impact your competitiveness in country. So that's why we have to have a plan, because any piece of that, we get to it and we're like, you know what, we're not going to be competitive, or it's going to cost us a lot. And our client wants that item, even though it's really heavy, it's going to cost us a lot in air. They know that, and they're willing to pay it. And they're our end customers, so it makes sense. So it just depends.
All right, thank you. So Jackie asked, are there IP related topics that we need to consider when exploring exporting? Yes,
of course, there are IP topics. The one thing I can say about that is, whatever, IP you have here, it's not going to be recognized abroad. So it's something that's probably the first thing to know, and that if you have a product, I would suggest talking to someone who can help you with that. We can guide you, we can provide some information on that, but the most important thing is to know you are not covered in other countries under the US patent system. So that's number one. The other thing is sometimes you have to really, we'll look at your product to determine, is it something that, is it highly engineered, or is it something that that would be desirable to copycat? So, before you spend a lot of money on that, I think that it's really important to get some professional advice, and we can direct you to that.
Thank you. Okay. How would you, what do you think the impact of inflation in the U.S. and other countries has on the exporting market? Does it make some products more affordable or less affordable?
What was the question? What was the
the impact of inflation in the United States?
Inflation. Oh. Gosh, I don't know. If it's costing us more to make these products, we're going to have to realize that, right? So, I think it just depends on your cost of goods and, how much margin you can find in your product. Sometimes it makes sense to go into a foreign market initially and strive for price competitiveness in order to get a foothold in the market. But that's probably going to depend on your company and if you can withstand that.
Okay, thank you. Would you say that, is there a desire for particular classes of American products?
Particular class of American products.
You were mentioning earlier that sometimes
high
the
quality,
higher price could be worth it.
Yeah, I think generally there's a couple of things. They look for quality. So, I've had companies, we were just talking about this yesterday, a company was selling in, a US company had the opportunity to sell into another country, and there was internal competition, and there was some protectionism kind of going on. That's where my federal friends step in and get involved. And the competitor, in-country competitor, was telling folks, well, their product is inferior, which in fact it wasn't. It was actually superior. And so, and then sometimes, countries they'll find a product and maybe they were using your product. This has happened to my companies here. They were selling to a foreign buyer. That foreign buyer said, geez, your stuff is really expensive. I'm going to go over here and get it from somewhere else. But they end up coming back because the product was of inferior quality. So I would say quality is a really strong suit for us. also, we're a pretty entrepreneurial and innovative market, and we come up with very unique products. And that's very attractive abroad. So I think those are our strong suits. When it comes to a particular product, I mean, of course, besides the big ones, right? We have the automotive and we have the aerospace and things like that. But when we come down thinking about our small and medium-sized businesses, it is very diverse. It's really diverse. I mean, it's hard to say.
Okay. Jackie asked, do you know if the perception of quality differs from country to country, or is it generally the same globally?
My understanding is really generally the same globally. US equals quality. That's just, a perception.
Thank you. Okay.
A general perception. Yeah.
Okay. Now, food products are very tightly regulated in the United States.
Yes.
Is that the same internationally?
Yes, it is. Yes, for sure. I do have some food companies anytime, and no matter what product I have, but food especially, they all have their counterpart of our FDA. So that's part of the plan. That export plan I keep bringing up is understanding what's that regulatory environment, because understanding that will help you to prioritize markets. Some markets may be more readily accessible, and some may be really challenging or even expensive to get through the regulatory hurdles. And so we would not prioritize those markets. But yes, every market's going to have their environment. Europe's pretty tough, if you can imagine, right? They're non-GMOs and all of that. And they're just very, very sustainability minded. They're very safety conscious. So they have a just pretty strict environment to get into. But of course, we can manage it. Just have to know what those are.
Okay. Does the Export Assistance Network assist in modifying the way a brand is marketed? I mean, such that it speaks to the culture that it's being sold to?
We certainly, I certainly understand that. We understand that as a topic. It's something that we teach in the classroom, right? We don't do that work. But we can provide feedback. We can provide maybe some cultural, information that might influence that. Sometimes when I think about branding, it's your messaging, right? And sometimes your message your tagline that is here will not translate correctly and actually could be a deterrent inadvertently. So understanding how your translations are, and then colors, sort of the attitude of the brand can be either positive or negative. So there are a lot of nuances to that we I think we all understand as far as advisors. But developing a brand is not something that we would do. We wouldn't develop it for you, but we would tell you things about what to be aware of.
Thank you. So would you say that a business, if they're considering exporting, they need to be have the bandwidth and be open to modifying the way their brand
yes.
is presented?
I would say so. Yes. I think the key is you definitely have to be flexible, adaptable when it comes to, and this is something as part of the plan again, do we have to, if you have circuitry and it's, it's wired for the US, it's not necessarily going to work in Europe, right? It has to be mechanically wired and so forth differently, different currents and so forth. So that's something that's a modification. Are you prepared to be able to modify your manufacturing processes to support a different market? So that's like a manufacturing example, but yeah, always we have to look at, well, what's your positioning here, and is that going to translate into another market? And if not, are you willing to kind of adjust that for that market? Doesn't have to be really expensive, but it might be adjusting your tagline or some things like that.
Thank you. In the United States, there is a separation between cosmetics and medical devices or medications. So is there a similar division in other countries? Are cosmetics as loosely regulated there as they are in the United States?
It would depend by country, and I wouldn't know offhand. I've done some limited work with a cosmetics company here. But that is a question that I probably would never know off the tip of my head. You know, those things change a lot. Regulations, policies, they are always shifting. And so anytime I start on a new project with a company, we have to stop and look at what's the regulatory environment today, because what it is today may be different from what it was a year or even 5 years ago.
So on that, then, would you recommend, is a pest analysis part of what the EAN would do when they're taking on a new client?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we teach that as well. We talk about that with the students, and that's something that we could definitely look at. Yeah.
Okay. Jackie's asking, how do we compare with other countries in terms of the Made in USA brand?
Meaning?
Jackie, are you asking about a desire for domestic products over imports? Or are you talking about quality or perception of quality? Yeah, she says both.
Quality and perception of quality. Well, okay, for example, I think it's going to depend. It will depend. You know, when you look at Germany, they're very sophisticated, obviously, you know, a lot of engineering. You know, if you're taking a product to Germany, you know, and you're in that realm, it's probably a lot of competition, and they're going to want to buy German, right? I think countries, you know, if they can source a quality product domestically, I think they're going to do it. But there are plenty of opportunities where the value proposition of an American product can make sense. And so it's really country by country. You know, in Latin America, they're not making a lot of stuff. They're just not, they're not making a lot of like stuff. So it's that those are markets that's sort of interesting. Now you got to look and see, oh, does that population, just the growth, you know, can it support, you know, an export, you know, exporting product there? You know, it can depend. You know, I have a manufacturer who's in the sort of sells into, I would say, the transportation sort of industry, and maybe construction, mirrored products, doing fantastic in Mexico. A lot of construction, a lot of building, truck transportation. So, you know, it really depends.
Okay, thank you. Jackie asked, where do we begin to research countries to see if our products would be accepted there?
Well, you should connect with your team in Maryland, and they'll help you. They're going to help you with all of this. Everything that I mean, I know that a lot of states do have resources similar to Ohio. They'll help you. But the first thing you do is start again at that Schedule B identification. That's, again, if you go, a great resource is trade.gov. And you can just even type in Schedule B. And what you're looking for is Schedule B search engine. And this is customs and from, you know, U.S. Customs, and there's a classification for your product. Again, it depends on how specific or how broad your category is. I mean, but it's going to have a number associated with it. That's a great place to start to look for that. And when you get to that Schedule B number, then that is great to then start looking at databases to understand where is that Schedule B number flowing. That's kind of a good place. So that's one way, thinking using data. You know, you know, understanding and really analyzing how you're selling and who you're selling to in the United States can also be indicative. You know, sometimes we're really looking at demographics. For instance, I had a vegan seafood company, right? So now I'm looking for markets where maybe sustainability is really important to them. Maybe they have a high seafood consumption. You know, maybe they have, you know, maybe they're importing, maybe they have to import seafood and we can see the flow of that. So we know that we have a product that, you know, that would be desirable for them. Maybe we know that our market, and once we get to that, maybe we're looking for a certain market of, you know, persons in a certain demographic, and maybe they have, you know, there's a cluster of them in a particular area or region of that country. So it's kind of following clues. And again, that's part of the plan. And that's something that I work with companies on. Typically those projects can take a lot of time. So I usually pull together a student team to help with those.
Thank you. On the topic of time, if a business comes to you and says, hi, we would like to start exporting our widgets, what is a general time frame? Is there a general time frame for when they can actually start exporting?
I would say you should never anticipate being in a rush to export. It's a longer process, mostly because first we have to have a plan. We like to have a plan. I mean, of course, I get companies who come to me. I work with companies who are brand new to exporting, and I work with companies who are exporting all over the world, right? So let's say I have someone exporting all over the world. I was just talking to one of these clients the other day, and, you know, I was asking, hey, whatever happened to Mexico? I mean, I know you're doing well there. I know we started this years ago and you're doing well. He's like, oh yeah, it's really growing. And I'm like, well, what else? Can you do more there? Can you do more just in Mexico? He's like, oh yeah, I really can, for sure. I just need more distributors and I need to figure out where else I should go. And I'm like, well, let's do a project. Let's get you involved with the international market support folks, my colleague. Let's get connected to our Mexico team on the ground. Let's do a high level project to kind of ascertain maybe where some, you know, now that we know that Guadalajara is a great area for you, or Monterrey, you know, where's the next region where would they think your product could do well, you know. So there's lots of ways of attacking it. But that's an example.
Thank you. So what is one thing that you would like every American business to know about exporting that you're certain that they don't know about it now?
Well, first of all, I would like them to know that there are resources available. Again, many states will have a team of people that are positioned and have the funding and the support of state and SBA resources, and they are available. We're kind of, and even the SBDC in general, we're kind of we're not as well known as I wish we were. Maybe it's our marketing problem, but the first thing is you don't have to go it alone. And yes, it's not, I would say, don't have expectations of exporting overnight. Yes, it can happen, but that shouldn't be your expectation. I think planning is really important, just like a business plan is for your domestic business. You know, it takes time. Sometimes it's kind of painful, but it's way less painful to do it up front. It's only through planning that and looking and research and understanding, well, you know, what are the logistics of getting my item there, and you know, timing and your timing and your available of your timing and all of these things. There's a lot of things involved. And so it can seem confusing, but if you have someone kind of guide you through that, it's definitely worthwhile.
Thank you. I know some businesses are interested in exporting, but they're wary because it's a daunting topic. So is this something that a business can enter into in an incremental way, you know, gradually, or is it something they have to be full bore with?
Well, I think that's, again, it's going back to the plan of what are you capable of and what are your goals, you know? And what I like to do is if I have a newer to export company and we're starting out, sometimes I get feedback, well, you know, here's 3 markets and we definitely are interested in these 3 markets. And so we kind of work through, why are these markets even in the radar, and do these markets hold the sort of the lowest hanging fruit of potential, right? And I like to prioritize. I like to find the markets and prioritize and pick one. And let's work through one. Now, I will say, if we can find them, if Canada or Mexico is potentially a good market, these are great places to start. I mean, you're in North America, we have a free trade agreement. You can truck your product. You're not obliged to get into an ocean liner, which is very expensive right now, and taking, you know, twice or 3 times the amount of time to get products there. I really like that Canada, Mexico start. Canada, great, you know, they speak your language. You might have to do some French translations, but, you know, ideally, you know, it could be a really good market to start. Again, I did mention Canada is still a foreign market. There are nuances that many people don't understand, but I think that's a great place to start, and not rush, you know, not rush it. These relationships take time, unlike in the US, and as you may know, you know, we're all about getting down to business, and you know, we sit down at the table and we want to talk business, and we don't want to talk about your family, and we don't want to know anything more about you. We just want to do a transaction. That is mostly not done abroad. You know, sitting down, meeting that distributor, understanding his family, having pictures of your family, having a cup of tea, having, you know, a really meaningful personal interaction is quite important, and even in Europe. So that's a mindset that you have to, and nobody's rushing, you know, so especially in Latin America. So you really have to kind of switch your mindset on how this is going to look.
Thank you. So if a business has entered the export market, are there benchmarks or specific metrics that they should be looking at to determine if this is a successful venture?
Yeah, so I think this comes down to the contractual agreement that you have. And let's say you're working with a distributor, which is very typical with products. You know, what are your goals? What's your year one goal for that distributor? You know, and is that agreement, probably that agreement is, you know, maybe it's set up for a 1 year, you know, and so that you know, you see how this relationship is going to go. And also, you know, with distributors, and, you know, sometimes they want like 3-year contracts, and sometimes they want exclusivity in a country. I would probably not recommend that, but every case is very unique. So that is a very negotiable document, but any expectations you have should be wrapped up in that contract. And, you know, I think, you know, and that involves, you know, the amount of orders they're going to place with you, and all of those details that I think that you're referring to.
Okay. So for export markets, will someone who's exporting, are they going to be dealing with distributors or wholesalers in another country, or the actual retailers?
It could be all of those things.
Okay.
So we have companies selling direct to end consumers. We have exporters selling to retailers. We have exporters selling to brokers, especially through the food business, and to distributors, I would say, and to agents. In Canada, they use a lot of agents. So a distributor is really your buyer. You know, they buy the product from you, then it's theirs. They are responsible for warehousing. They're responsible for marketing it. In that relationship, you will not necessarily have, you're not going to get a lot of feedback on who they're selling it to, although generally you're going to know, but that's really their relationship. You're just selling it to them, right? An agent is more someone who's almost like a broker, like they're positioned to help you find an end buyer. You pay them maybe a percentage of that sort of matchmaking, but once they find a buyer, let's say, they kind of introduce you to, and then you sell directly to that customer, and the agent's just getting kind of a percentage of an agreed upon percentage for that transaction.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, one last question here. How does it work when we sell direct to consumers outside of the country? Are there additional paperwork requirements we need for each sale? And how should tax be handled? Yeah.
So selling direct to consumers. So they're still, and I guess it depends on what we're doing here. If we're talking about an Amazon transaction, and that gets into Amazon stuff, but so there's always import duties, and there are taxes. Those taxes are a sales tax, really, and they stay internal to to that country, that importer has to pay those. They have to pay those import duties, and they have to pay the tax. That falls on them to pay. And if it was a distributor who is the importer and paying all those things, they're going to be passing those costs along the way, down the pike, which is why, as part of the plan, you need to understand, well, what are those tariffs on my product? In some countries, that tariff might be extremely high, and that would be unattractive to you. Whereas if compared to some other markets, it might be more attractive. Well, maybe let's start with that. Let's start with that market, and you know, given consideration of all the other things that we're looking at. So, so that would be that whoever's the importer is paying is responsible for that. You know, when we talk about, if you're talking about setting up a foreign entity, now we're having a whole separate tax conversation, right? If you're talking about setting up a distribution center abroad, now we got a whole other ball game going on. That's where I bring in tax experts, because I don't know the intricacies of that, but yes.
All right, thank you. And it is, say we've been here for 58 minutes, so any final thoughts?
Oh, thanks, Jackie. And definitely email me and I'll set you up with the Maryland folks. And Mike, if you're in Ohio and you want to connect with me or some of the other EANs, I'm happy to do so. All of the questions that you have I'm really happy that you attended today and that you asked me those things. We can help you. We can help you. We can provide you with resources. Again, there's no cost to those resources. You will be amazed at the kind of work that we do, at the work that our consultants do in country. The quality of the work is amazing. And I really hope that you engage with us.
All right, thank you. Everyone have a great one.
Yeah, thank you so much.